You know, I'll be honest, I don't even know how to start this one. Fear and Hunger is one of the most, if not the most disturbing, vile, repulsive video games I have ever played. Everything has a penis. Everything. And I'm sure some of you perked up there. Oh, wait a minute, now I'm interested. I thought it would take a long time for any game to rival the imagery and Outlast trials. No. And yet, Fear and Hunger is one of my favorite games at the moment. I don't know what that says about me. Maybe I need to see a psychiatrist. Although to be fair, you guys recommended this game to me, so I think we all need help. But to give you the thesis statement, Fear and Hunger is a hardcore turn-based survival horror game inside a brutal, dark dungeon. It's filled with unforgiving mechanics, horrifying creatures, permadeaths, and very rich lore. You will fail multiple times. It took me 3 characters before I could beat this game once. You know, at least in games like Elden Ring, if a boss is giving you a hard time, you can explore more, level up, and try different strategies. Even summon help as a last resort. In Fear and Hunger, there is no such luxury. Your plan is pretty much praying you don't softlock yourself with low HP and no heals, and hoping that the coin flip lands on the right side. No! There's a lot to cover in Fear and Hunger, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go over what happened on my first playthroughs, emphasizing the difficulty, then the horror factor and what makes it unique, which will then lead into my favorite aspects about the lore. What can I say? I like organization. This is also an episode of Horror Quest, where we embark on a journey to find the best and scariest horror games. And spoiler alert, this one's gonna score high. So without further ado, my name is Josh, also known as Groin Pain, and I hope you enjoy. The game begins with a selection of characters for you to choose from. I chose the Mercenary because I thought it was the coolest. I never touched the other characters, but interestingly enough, you can find and hire the other characters you didn't choose later inside. You stand before the dungeons of Fear and Hunger. A story is woven to justify why you're here in the first place. Along with the story, you're given choices that determine what items and what skills you start with. So for example, I abandoned my comrades during an ambush because I had a sneaking suspicion that would get me an ability to leave fights easier. And I was correct. Immediately, I was dropped into the world and realized I have no idea what I'm doing. 30 seconds in, and I understood the abusive relationship I was about to endure. I got no tutorial, no guide, no controls, no shoes. It's your job to figure out how the game works, and even after 25 hours, I'm still learning. My first idea was to explore the barrels and boxes nearby, and like a lot of survival horror games, you're scrounging up materials or items to simply get by. However, unlike in Resident Evil where these drops are guaranteed and you know what you're getting each time, in Fear and Hunger these items are randomized on each playthrough. This can be a blessing or a curse that sometimes causes a full-on reset, and I'll explain why later. Soon after, a couple of dogs caught my scent, and I began my first battle. That lasted about 20 seconds. And this kinda sums up the game pretty well. Humiliated by a couple of pooches. I didn't even reach the guard with a Subway sandwich in between his legs, and when I finally did, I took his arm off. But then I had to do a mandatory coin flip. I failed that and immediately got railed. Now I had to start over from the very beginning. The first 5 minutes of my playthrough. I think this is a good time to detail the difficulty of Fear and Hunger. You might encounter really strong enemies like the new gods of this world, but it's really these coin flips, status conditions, or soft locks that cause your demise in this game. And it happens a lot. There is more RNG in this game than freaking competitive Pokemon. The main RNG factor being said coin flips. This is one of the main mechanics of Fear and Hunger and will determine numerous circumstances. You would think only major bosses have these insta-kill coin flip attacks. No, as a matter of fact, most basic enemies have it too. Some will deal high damage, others will, take advantage of you, but most are going to be insta-kills. Some even have unique game over sequences, such as the Harvestman for example. If you fail the coin flip, the Harvestman will proceed to break all your limbs and harvest your organs in a disturbingly slow manner. Let me tell you something, I was not okay when I first saw that.
No!
Others will put you inside a cage, some will rip your face off, or even split you down the middle hot dog style. There are just so many ways things can go wrong in the middle of combat. However, there are also many ways things can go wrong outside of combat too. The coin flip does not only apply to enemies and boss fights, but also to looting or a potential game over entirely. Let me give you some examples. So you'll come across 2 instances of disturbing rituals dedicated to the older gods. Again, I'll talk about them later. There's the bunny orgy and the wolf cannibalistic orgy. I know, just let it sink in. If for some reason you decide to partake in either of these rituals, you'll initiate a coin flip. Fail that, and your character will become entranced by that ritual forever. Ironically, I don't think this is the worst one. I stumbled across a toilet which gave heavy detail as to what was inside and around it, which, thank you game. Then the game tells me the hole is just big enough for me to jump inside. I thought to myself, there's gotta be something inside here worth searching for, otherwise the game wouldn't tell me this. I should have known better at this point, but I was too curious and jumped inside. Yeah, I got stuck forever. The game literally states that there's no way to get out. I got soft-locked and starved to death. I doomed myself all because I thought there might be some loot inside a dirty toilet. Sometimes random events will occur and a coin flip might save you from an early demise that you didn't even initiate. The floors can cave in, or a black witch will ensnare you inside a different dimension, the usual stuff. Although she is quite easy to kill, but I didn't know that at the time. But one of the biggest ways this game violates you is when trying to save the game. Yes, there is a coin flip here too. Now obviously coin flips are a 50-50, but for some reason whenever I save, it feels like a 25-75. I remember losing the coin flip, and as I was sleeping, a monster appeared in the room and proceeded to murder my entire party. I lost about 30 minutes of progress. See, the coin flips are absolutely brutal. You could be zooming through the entire dungeon only for one bad toss to cause a game over. But my friends, it gets worse. Another brutal aspect about Fear and Hunger are the status conditions. Buckle up, because these are egregious conditions that one or all of your characters can suffer from. Now, some of them are strictly inside combat, such as fire or concussion. Those aren't really that bad. It's the ones that affect your exploration and progress where it really becomes difficult, or, again, a game ender entirely. I feel as though it is my duty to explain each one to you because I want you to understand what I went through. Parasitic worms is the first status effect most players will encounter, therefore it's really not that bad. All it really does is double the rate in which you lose hunger, and considering food you can find is randomly generated, this could be no issue at all, or a real pain in the groin. Bleeding is, I think, a tie for the weakest. After every turn you take 3 damage, which isn't really that bad. Outside of combat, nothing happens. You can cure this by using a cloth fragment, which is a very easy to find item that has a guaranteed pickup from any bed. Now poison is a similar scenario, except it deals 10 damage at the end of every turn, and the white vial you need to cure it is a rarer drop. There's an even stronger version of poison that drains your health over time outside of combat, which that's fun. Broken bones reduce your maximum HP. Honestly, when compared to the others, it's not that bad. It's only by a few points anyway, so it's barely noticeable. And then we have infections. Now we're getting somewhere. Infections occur when you're scratched by a dirty or diseased enemy, which is pretty much everything. The way it works is after you go through a certain number of areas indicated by the black screen transitions, your character will just die if it's not treated in time. This is one of the most common and annoying status conditions in the game. Most enemies can cause this affliction and can only be treated by green herbs or sawing off that arm or leg that's infected. As you can understand, this is a killer for first-time players because they don't know any better. They think, oh, I'm not taking any damage, I'm sure everything's fine. Sure enough, the character kills over dead before they know it. And it's not like the game tells you what this icon means or what it's doing. You have to find out the hard way. I certainly did. Like most cures, it's RNG based. Now, granted, you can find some green herbs that are hard drops that will spawn on every playthrough, but if you run out, I mean, good luck finding more. And also, losing a limb is a pretty big deal too. You can use a bone saw, if you find one, to remove the infected limb, because it's certainly better than dying. However, now you can hold a shield or sprint as fast as you want to, and if you're infected again, that's a reset, my friend. Blindness. This one's fun. Mostly done by the Crow Mauler, a tough mini-boss that will literally peck your eyes out. Without your eyes, the world is covered in darkness, with no way to navigate it properly. There is no cure. You've lost your eyes forever. A soft reset is your only option at this point. This next one caused me to start the game again with an entirely new character, the Brain Flower. Some enemies will be afflicted with this status condition, and if that flower sprays pollen on you, play the Last of Us theme. The player can no longer control the actions of that character. They now act on their own accord, sometimes attacking the other characters or even themselves. It is insanely difficult to keep on going without a cure, which would be worm juice. On my second playthrough, I didn't have any worm juice. I already looted all the boxes in the previous areas and couldn't move forward without a guarantee of finding it, so I had really no choice but to start all over. There's a couple other status conditions like bleeding from anus, but I think you get the idea. There's also fear and hunger, attributes that you must maintain on all your characters, although I think that's kind of self-explanatory. You know, feed characters, they die. You know, take care of mental health, they deal less damage and take more damage too. The combination of RNG-based looting, RNG-based insta-kills, and the status conditions all make for a grueling journey. They all work in tandem with one another. You're trying to find materials to keep your characters healthy and heal them if necessary. All the while, each battle has imminent danger that either kills you outright or leaves you with some status condition that may or may not be able to cure. Not to mention, you could cure all the afflictions but have no heals, so the start of the next battle, you have less HP. But I think the real kicker here that subverted my expectations is when you save. My mind has been trained that whenever I save in a video game, I fully restore my health, stamina, mana, etc. In Fear and Hunger, you still awake in the same condition you went to bed in. Saving does not cure it. You could be overpowered like I was on my subsequent playthroughs, but death can still happen just as easily. Oh, and let me not forget to mention, terror and starvation. Now this is the game's harder difficulty where just a few changes occur. Enemies deal and take less damage, that's kind of a given. The darkness obscures more of the player's vision now, so without a torch, you're walking around blind pretty much. Reduced escape chances, food you can find can be rotten now. New events, hunger drains faster. There's even small changes like when looting bookshelves. If you fail the coin toss, sometimes a rat event will occur and infect the player, as if you needed to punish us more by failing an RNG coin toss. It is insane. In hard mode, everything in terror and starvation applies, but with one teeny tiny detail. You can't save. If you ask me, this is one of the best survival horror games I have ever played. The only other game I can think of that's equal and in some cases better is Darkwood. I didn't even finish that game. I never felt like I was thriving in Fear and Hunger. It was more so keeping my head just above the water at all times. Every single positive opportunity is saving, looting, escaping, evading. They were never given to me. I had to earn my victory for each encounter. I had to earn that rest on those prison beds. I had to earn the right to not get penetrated by this guy's crotch horn, which I unfortunately did not earn. Hopefully you understand now how Fear and Hunger earns that survival tag in the Steam category. But what about the horror elements? This game doesn't, have heart-pounding gameplay, nor does it really scare you in the traditional sense. What makes this game horrific to me and to many others is its disturbing imagery, implications, and lore that makes your spine crawl. Fear and Hunger will cover and show you things that other games wouldn't even attempt to explain in a shallow fashion. As I dived deeper into the dungeons, I stepped on a rusty nail and had to saw off my own leg, but it was here that I also found the first friendly face, Sir Seymour. He's a knight that was sent down here with his own party to find out more about this mysterious dungeon. But more importantly, what happened to a man named Rudimir? I then died to an elite guard and stepped on the same rusty nail again. I mention Rudimir because I want to tell you his story. Rudimir was a captain from the land of Rondon. He was tasked with purging the dungeons of Fear and Hunger of its vile evil and cold void. For the kingdom believed their misfortunes, plagues, and famine came from this cursed place. The dungeons were in fact built upon ancient catacombs, and anyone who entered became mentally insane. As Rudimir traveled deeper, his resources ran low. He came across an underground society known as the Cave Dwellers. It's here that he traded an ancient artifact for simply some food and supplies. This artifact being the Cube of the Depths, which would be the key to a long-forgotten city, and a major setting in Fear and Hunger. Unfortunately, Rudimir would never cure the dungeons of its evil. He would succumb to it, the darkness driving him mad and feeding him violent visions of crows. Now he wanders the halls, purging any and all who breathe as the Crow Mauler. In-game, you'll get an audible warning and text stating, "A terrifying presence has entered the room. This is Rudimir, or the Crow Mauler." He is an insanely tough mini-boss, honestly more tough than most bosses, and I highly recommend avoiding him if you can afford it. I mentioned before he can peck your eyes out, but he can also peck your head off. His other attack, Maul, does insane damage and breaks bones with ease. And he's kind of a beefy boy too, so unless you can deal enough damage in one turn, you're gonna lose something or someone from your party. There's an even stronger version of the Crow Mauler within the lowest levels of the gauntlet inside the God of the Depths. This one has 2 heads, and while it's kind of more of the same fight, he can attack twice as much now, which means he can potentially kill 2 of your team members in 1 turn. But the point I'm trying to make here is that good horror games have good stories. Stories that explain the setting or the characters and give you more of a reason to be fearful of it, more context. It introduces existential dread, moral dilemmas, or psychological horror that lingers in the mind, far longer than any single jump scare. And, in general, it's fascinating to me. A good story provides excellent immersion and curiosity. I wanted to know more about the gods of this realm. I wanted to learn about each enemy I came across. I wanted to know more about why the dungeons drain your sanity. The Dungeons of Fear and Hunger is a disgusting, vile place. These prisoners you come across are from the land of Rondon. They thought of no better punishment than to cast them into the darkness of these dungeons. They went mad, as well as the prison guards, which are now common enemies you come across. As you venture deeper, the residents become more twisted. The cave dwellers, while they have some sort of sentience, is a mockery of what humanity has accomplished. Reanimated corpses that guard the valuables they once carried, accompanied by specters that wander the mines. Body snatchers that were once grave robbers that were sealed inside tombs as punishment. They prayed to the God of the Depths for salvation, and this is how their God saved them, by turning them into this insectoid-like monster. These enemy designs are freaking great. You don't need me to tell you that. And as I mentioned in the intro, everyone has their genitalia revealed, because down here, decency does not matter. It's the shock value that got me, because I had no idea what I was getting into when I first started playing. I thought, oh, this is gonna be a cool little experience, a little neat pixelated horror game, and then I saw the guard's stinger, and I thought, wow, alright, this is what's happening. However, it's really the implications and other imagery that really stuck with me. Again, this is a 2D pixelated game. The graphics are far less than what I'm used to. My CPU's temperature was at a cool 69 degrees when playing this game. And yet, the naked corpses made me cringe. I never thought a game would go so far as to show a freaking penis in detail. Listen, I know I keep on harping on the genitals, I know, because you have so many games. How many games have you played that cover the topic of sex and what it means in gruesome detail? In my opinion, this is kind of a touchy subject to show. That's why games don't ever dare come close to this line, let alone cross it like Fear and Hunger does. Another example would be how games don't let you kill children, usually. Again, it's a touchy subject. It's too vile to even suggest sometimes, and yet, Fear and Hunger has child sacrifices. There's an NPC down in the mines known as the Pocket Cat. In Fear and Hunger, he's essentially the boogeyman who takes children away to feast on them, in the service of his own god. You can actually trade the girl or your, bear with me here, kid demon in exchange for valuable items. There's an old god of fertility that created mankind that I'll cover later, and its definition of sex and marriage is way more gruesome than what you're thinking. These are the details that really bring the horror of a game together. Fear and Hunger pulls no punches in its depiction of suffering, body horror, and psychological dread. If you like cosmic horror, Fear and Hunger has it. If you like dark fantasy, Fear and Hunger has that too. And the best part is that both of these genres of horror all work beautifully together. Combine that with the difficulty of surviving these dungeons, it brings the experience full circle. Everything is trying to kill you in the most disgusting way possible. Every corner there could be death. You have to literally keep your sanity in check. When you're that disarmed, disempowered, and even then having to rely on luck in certain endeavors, that's horror. Sometimes not knowing the why behind a monster or story can be executed perfectly, but understanding what they are and how they turned into these creatures or gods can truly be a tragic tale. Such is the case of one of the main characters, Lagarde. And this leads into one of my favorite parts of Fear and Hunger, the gods and their lore. There's a lot of lore in Fear and Hunger, but the gods are what intrigued me the most, so that's what I'll focus on. That and the city of Mahabre, where the new gods reside. Fear and Hunger provides rich religious imagery. There are numerous cults dedicated to the old or new gods, priests that use dark magic, sacrifices that you witness or even partake in, and that's simply a few drops in the bucket. If you were to ask me what does it remind you of, I would say it's like a combination of Bloodborne and Lovecraftian storytelling. Enlightenment, Ascension are key themes throughout this game. Many of the older gods are gone, and even gazing upon their remnants leads to insanity. Others who are ambitious enough ascend to godhood. Books of ancient texts that, if read, can make you go insane. That is, if you lose the coin toss. I love religious imagery, it's my absolute favorite. That's why I love games like Bloodborne or Blasphemous, and now, Fear and Hunger. But what exactly are the old and new gods? Where do they originate from? I mentioned earlier during Rudimir's story that he traded an ancient artifact known as the Cube of the Depths. This is the key to enter the ancient city known as Mahabre, the source of madness creeping into the dungeons. Mahabre used to be a place of worship for the old gods, who represented aspects of creation and emotion that still linger on today. However, a long time ago, the old gods departed for unknown reasons. Some say it's because humanity has turned their back on them, relying on their selfish desires to fulfill their empty purposes. Without the old gods, the inhabitants began to experiment on each other and themselves. Such mortals would ascend to godhood using the secrets that the city still harbored, and thus the new gods were created, and now reside within Mahabre. Using the Cube of the Depths, we can travel back into the past to interact with the city in different and unique ways. Even in the past, the old gods are nowhere to be found, meaning they left a very long time ago. However, that doesn't mean they're not here specifically. You just have to go deeper. In certain endings, you can sit on the throne after defeating one of the new gods, and reach a level beneath the ancient city, the Void. Also known as True Mahabre, the new gods describe this area as the other side of the coin. A different dimension, to put it simply. It is said that this is the birthplace of not only the old gods, but creation entirely. As you explore this realm, a deep green hue can be seen coming from beneath the ground throughout the whole area. This is where the old gods originated from. This is their birthplace. Perhaps they've gone back home to leave us to our own destruction, or escaped into another place, to await their time again. Still, their influence is strong within the present. Inside one of the first rooms, I stumbled across a ritual circle with the options to sacrifice, make love, or pray. I like how our character attempts to make love by themselves, but nothing happens. Now, if you pray, you have 3 options to choose from: Grogorath, Sylvian, and Ulmer, the old gods of this realm. Let's first talk about Grogorath, the god of destruction and human sacrifice. Grogorath is a horrid creature, sporting multiple eyes, a bloody torso, and you really can't see it here, but in his books, a corpse is stretched upon his stomach, mimicking the sacrifices his followers do as an act of worship. His only wish is for blood to be spilled in his name. He granted mankind with dark magic in the form of black orbs, blood spells, and more, which his followers like the Yellow Mages and Black Witches use maliciously. You remember that wolf cult I mentioned a couple of times before? Yeah, those are followers of Grogorath. They are eating and killing each other in his name, to be granted more affinity towards their god of chaos. Now, you can partake in this ritual or even pray to him to be granted more affinity yourself. This allows you to use his spells during combat, and honestly, I would say it's worth it. Black Orb kinda goes crazy if I'm being honest. Now inside the gauntlet, which by the way sucks balls, once you reach the end, you can encounter Grogorath himself. Now don't get it twisted, this isn't Grogorath in his entirety, this is merely traces of his being. And yet he's still one of the toughest boss fights in the game. Like imagine struggling to fight what's essentially someone's fart cloud. You can't even beat him in the end. He acknowledges your strength, but then shows you the knowledge of the old gods that drives you to insanity, and then you just kinda die. And that's the same story for most of the other old gods. The next one I want to talk about, and honestly I think is my favorite, is Sylvian, the god of fertility, love, lust, and creation. Before creation existed, Sylvian created humanity in her likeness. She wishes for mankind to make love in her name, to cherish this gift she has given to them. Remember that bunny orgy next to the thicket? Those are all followers of Sylvian. The bunny masks are never explained, but I think it's because those animals are known for their energetic and excessive breeding, so maybe that's why. We don't really know. However, there's one detail that I've been leaving out for dramatic effect. Sylvian's perspective of marriage and sex isn't the same as how we view it. It is a bond, a marriage of flesh itself. I mentioned earlier that making love to yourself in these ritual circles yields no results. However, if you have a willing participant, you both will start to physically merge into one being. This being is simply known as the marriage, or whatever name you give it. From a lore perspective, this is disgusting, but from an in-game perspective, it actually kinda rules. Any afflictions or limbs you were missing before have now been restored. Your attack is higher, and you can equip better gear than before. Honestly, a pretty good trade-off. There are others within the dungeon that have partaken in this ritual too. The Moonless Guards is this unholy union between a prison guard and the cave wolves outside the mines. Sylvian does not care who participates, just if it's done right. The Yellow Lizard Mages are another example, a marriage between the Lizardmen and the Yellow Mages. It possesses the strength of both and makes for a formidable opponent inside the gauntlet. In some cases, this marriage is taken a step further, with a third participant joining the ritual. This is known as the Abominable Marriage. Any resemblance from the previous characters used is now all gone. All you're left with is this juggernaut of a monster. Unfortunately, it gets worse, because sometimes this marriage can fail, such is the case with Sir Seymour and Buckman. If you don't save their other party members, which I did not, they'll attempt a marriage just to stay alive. You can find them inside the catacombs struggling to even breathe. It likely failed because they didn't do it properly, or because of the blood on the ground leading to them, one of them was unwilling to do it. I think it failed because it was gay. One failed marriage that most of you will probably come across is known as the Human Hydra, a horrid amalgamation of faces and appendages. These are guards that were afraid of the dark, afraid of losing their sanity, so they performed an act of love that failed terribly. Now they're a defenseless mass of flesh. Seriously, you can just whack away at them and they don't do anything. Unlike Grogaroth, Sylvian's influence is a bit more prominent in the game, although lore-wise they're about the same. I think this interpretation of common knowledge is what makes Sylvian interesting to me. With Grogaroth and the other gods, the way they represent and what they do makes sense. It falls in line with how we think. Sylvian's idea of marriage, however, is completely different from normal expectations. It's a higher form of bonding that the older god puts on a pedestal, glorifies it in a way. What makes her even more interesting to me is her physical representations. Now, throughout the years, many of her followers have seen visions of her depicting her beauty in different ways, mostly being humanoid. However, if we encounter her inside the void, she is straight out of a Lovecraftian novel. Mayhaps it's because these are simply her traces, but again, subverting expectations. I like that. I thought that the god of fertility and lust would be a woman, or at least in the image of one, not this, giant squid. I love how Fear and Hunger does not care to align normal definitions properly, and throws so many curveballs lore-wise. In my opinion, Sylvian does it best, which is why she's one of my favorites. These are just two of the older gods in Fear and Hunger, and I know there's more to talk about like Omer and the God of the Depths, but some of my favorite characters in the game have ascended beyond their mortal chains, and I really want to talk about them. As I mentioned before, the new gods are mortal beings who have ascended to greater heights. They now reside in Mahabre, taking turns ruling over the city as time recycles their reign. The dominating one is currently the ruler. If you find the Hall of the New Gods, you can ask them about Francois. They don't really like him because he's cocky, he's arrogant, and foolish. This is actually shown very well in his fight because he has a huge weakness. You can actually stunlock him for the entire fight by basically gaslighting him. You tell him he's a puppet in the greater scheme of things, he's like, what? Nuh-uh. And then he just kind of sits there and lets you win. It's great. However, during the events of Fear and Hunger, we witnessed the event of two people ascending into godhood. One such man was named Lagarde, now known as the Yellow King. He's one of the main characters of Fear and Hunger and is pretty much Griffith from Berserk. He'll stop at nothing to achieve his higher purpose. He'll sacrifice innocence or even you to attain his goal. We're here in the dungeons to find Lagarde. That was our original mission. If we find him before 30 minutes have passed in-game, he'll be barely alive in his cell. If we talk to him, he'll claim to have amnesia from the brutal torture he's endured, which, makes sense. If you have Ragnavoldr in your party, he'll grow suspicious of Lagarde and his whole amnesia act. This escalates even further because if you lead them both to the ancient city, a fight will actually break out. Turns out, during Lagarde's conquest, he murdered Ragnavoldr's party and close friend. He was trying to find an ancient artifact to enter Mahabre to ascend into godhood, and he believed that his people had it. You can either save or let Lagarde get murdered, but either way, nothing good will come out of this. If you save Lagarde, kill the new gods, and approach the throne, Legard will reveal his true intentions. Ragnvaldr was right. He was faking his amnesia this whole time. He endured all that torture, gathered all this knowledge to be ready to sit on that throne and enter enlightenment. If you find Legard inside the void, he'll take pity on you. He talks as if you're beneath him now, which you are. He's already ascended into godhood. You have two options now, submit or refuse. Now if you submit, you get ending C2. Somehow you make it out of the dungeon safely, probably because Legard takes pity on you and lets you leave. Legard's visions have come to fruition, to unite all of humanity under one authority. Years go by, decades, and you catch a glimpse of Legard passing through the land of Rondon. He has not aged since you found him in that dungeon years ago. The only difference is his sickly yellow skin, colored by the green hue of the void. This was no longer Legard. This was the Yellow King. If you refuse, a final battle will commence. It's pretty tough, but it's manageable. If you win, Legard won't take over the world because he's dead now, and you escaped the dungeons, but you learned nothing and accomplished nothing. Honestly, one of the more happier endings. There's more details to Legard's story, but that's the basis of his ascension into godhood. I could make a whole video about this character alone because he's that intricate and detailed. His story is actually based on one of the first cosmic horror stories ever invented, called The Yellow Sign, back in 1897. It's a really interesting read, and I recommend it. Now, the other character who became one of the new gods is the girl. Her ending is the canonical ending in Fear and Hunger and leads to the events of the second game. Oh, by the way, there's a second game. She's one of the optional people you can have in your party, but necessary if you want her ending. As you venture back into Mahabre and defeat the new gods, one of them named Nilvan will encounter you during your dream sequence. The girl cowers behind you. She requests the player to deliver the girl into the heart of the darkness. If you accept, her soul will be joined with the girl, being the last piece of the puzzle to her ascension. But what makes the girl so special? I was wondering this myself, why her? Well, she's actually the daughter of Nilvan. Nilvan wishes for humanity to ascend beyond their mortal coil, and so she chose her own daughter. And guess who the father is? Yeah, I know, it's crazy. Legard is believed to be the man of prophecy by Nilvan, so she had a child with him. And now with her soul inside the girl, all you have to do is bring her to the altar of darkness. The boss battle begins. The girl is in the process of ascending, so for now, she's defenseless. After all of what I endured in this game, I did not think twice on attacking a 10-year-old girl. However, she begins to change, and drastically too. She goes through 5 phases before she reaches her final form, the god of fear and hunger. Some sort of altar thing, I have no idea. Funny enough, you can nullify the first couple of phases if you give the girl the peculiar doll and dagger. Even in her godlike state, she'll look at the items on the ground and remember you, refusing to attack for some amount of turns. However, the final phase is brutal. 6,000 health and the ability to take 80 health or mind instantly. Not to mention she can burn you too. Definitely one of the hardest and my favorite boss fight in the game. In her ending, she acknowledges our suffering and grants us a merciful end. Funny enough, I think that's the best ending. She begins an era called the Cruel Age, an age where humanity's fear and hunger drove them to evolve and adapt to new heights. While there's not much lore on the god of fear and hunger because her reign is just beginning in the first game, I find it absolutely fascinating. This is what the game is about: tough encounters, rich lore, and disturbing imagery. Fear and Hunger is truly a masterpiece in its own right. It does exactly what it sets out to do, and even more. These are some of the most disgusting enemy designs I've ever seen in video games. One of the best survival games I've played. Granted, I haven't played many survival horror games, but I've played enough to get a good idea on what a good one looks like. Now, I am aware that there is a second game. Will I be covering it? Who knows really? If this video does really well and you guys ask for it, I don't see why not. It'll be a while though, because Monster Hunter Wilds, at the time of recording this video, it comes out in 4 days. So yeah, we'll find out. But do I have any cons for Fear and Hunger? Not really. Obviously, I prefer games that are more action-packed, heart-pounding gameplay, things like that. But that's not what I'm grading on, and that's not what this game is trying to do. I was outlandishly confused in the beginning on what was going on, but something that good games do is they hook you in. And then your curiosity leads you into discovering the story and world building of that game. Fear and Hunger did that. It definitely hooked me alright. I was watching speedruns, Let me tell you something, I never watch speedruns. Never. The only other game I do that with is Dark Souls. That's an accomplishment if you ask me. When it comes to the spooky scale grading on how good of a horror experience this game was, I'm giving Fear and Hunger a perfect 10 out of 10. A horrific masterpiece. If you can stomach the imagery, I cannot recommend this game enough. I played through the game multiple times to get some of the multiple endings and enjoyed every single moment. And that's all I have for you guys today. Thanks for watching, and this has been another episode of Horror Quest, and another big video essay too. And if you did enjoy, be sure to leave a like and to subscribe for more content like this. And I'll see you in the next video. Take care everyone, and of course, stay safe.